All right, guys, it is 1 p.m. on January 11th. That's Wednesday, January 11th, and we're going live to talk about an issue that I think a lot of people have questions about, tough to walk through and actually experience. No one likes difficulty, but I think it's something that we have to experience. I got to give a shout out to Lisa Irby, who is a principal in the Cleveland City School Systems, who actually, challenged me to do something on failure. Why is failure important? And then give a shout out to John Miller. If you've never visited QBQ.com, that's the question behind the question. John Miller had sent me a response the other night and really just motivated me to get up and write some things down. And this is kind of where this spawned from. So, the question today is failure important? Why is failure valuable? And we're going to discuss those things. But first, I want to tell you a story. My daughter's in middle school. I have an 11-year-old daughter. She's in middle school this year. Obviously, elementary school was great. Moved to a new middle school. There's 400 or 500 kids in the 6th grade. Comes home one day. She's a little distraught. She says to her mom and I got to give her mom credit. She's very calm and collective when it comes to these things. She's a little more white trash than me when it comes to sporting events, but she does stay calm. But Brooke comes home one day and she says, "Listen, my teacher, thought I was cheating. I don't know what to do." I mean, she is torn up. And immediately as a parent, when your kid gets accused of something, you kind of go into defense mode. But because my wife is great and because we've talked through some of these things, we kind of stayed calm, no big deal. Hey, listen, she's a human. She possibly could have cheated. And if she did, she needs to experience the ramifications of that. She was told she's going to have to take a new test, a harder test by herself. So we just kind of let the scenario play out. Even though it was difficult, we didn't call and ask questions. We let it play out. She goes the next day. She aces the test. Everything works out. She was scared to death of the assistant principal, that she was going to have to go see, who's actually a good friend of ours that she didn't even know was friends of her mom and dad. But we just let the scenario play itself out. She comes back. After this scenario is played out, she's ecstatic. She does a great job on her test. Her relationship with her teacher's great. The principal's nice now. She's on this leadership deal. And looking back, it was such a minute detail in her life, but allowing her to walk through that and experience that and overcome that on her own teaches her so much. Because here's the reality of today. Is that we want to protect our kids from these things, and oftentimes by protecting them, it ends up hurting them in the long run. So today we're going to look at failure and struggling and all these different things. I know a lot, we hear a lot this word resilient. Hey, we have a culture, and I don't want to say this generation, because anytime I speak about this generation, I'm talking about anyone on earth who is breathing. That is this generation, because we are all playing a part. There's no generation better than the other. We're all playing a part. We're either part of the problem or part of the solution, and I want to make sure that we are part of the solution. So in a culture where we say there's some lack of resiliency, and listen, as a coach, I want resilient athletes. As an employer, you want resilient employees. As a family, you want a resilient spouse. As parents, you want resilient children. But the question becomes, how do we teach that? And what do we have to do to teach that? And I think it's not about what we have to do, but about what we don't do that actually allows this resiliency be taught in our children's lives. So here's the first thing I want you to see. The goal of this whole journey is not failure. As I got up the other night and I began to write, I started looking up the definition of failure. And here's the thing about failure. Failure has an end point. If you go to the doctor and you have heart problems, it's not great, but at least with heart problems, there are still solutions. If you end up at the hospital with heart failure, you're probably not coming home. That means your life has ended. So the goal, I hear a lot of people talk about, we need to let these kids fail. No, we need to build people to protect them from failure. So as you make decisions and you look at things, the goal is not failure. The goal is struggle. We want to put and allow things to happen in our kids' lives and our athletes' life that allow them to struggle. The consequence of struggle in the 6th grade is not very high. The consequence of struggle in the 7th grade is not very high. The consequence of struggle in the 2nd grade is not very high. The longer we go in life, the greater the consequence is when we're unwilling to go through that difficult moment or that difficult phase. So the goal is not failure. We want to protect from failure by building a young person who is resilient, who can manage struggle and actually get through those things. So the goal is not failure. The goal is to allow our kids to struggle. Here's the second thing that I want us to see. Struggle or difficulty is not a necessary part of life's journey, but it's an inevitable part of life's journey. We do not have to create the struggle. I hear it. I'm in the athletics world, so I hear athletes and coaches talk about all the time, oh, we're going to put them in this hard tournament so they can fail or struggle or whatever. First of all, that's such a minute part of this whole journey of life that has very little significance. If we would just let the natural struggles play out without intervening, we would see so much growth take place in kids' lives, and we would see them mature and grow and become so much more resilient. Versus trying to think of new ways to create struggle, just let some of the simple ones, like getting a B in elementary school. Listen, do you know how often I hear parents talk about having parent-teacher conferences in elementary school because their kid got a B? Newsflash. No one looks at your 3rd grade transcript. And when you go to school to fight for a B in the 3rd grade, your child is probably going to expect you to fight for an A instead of a B for the rest of their life. It's not a big deal. Just let them walk through that process. I've yet to meet a teacher that intentionally gives a kid a bad grade. There are some out there, but they are few and far between. If your kid got a B, they probably earned a B. Let them deal with it. Figure out how to get an A so that when the consequence is higher, like in high school when they do look at your transcript, or in college when they will kick you out of school, they actually know how to manage that struggle. So remember, struggle and difficulty is not a necessary part of life's journey. It's an inevitable part of life's journey. Look at your life, see where those struggles are taking place, and then figure out, hey, how can I take a step back and allow this to play itself out so that my child or my athlete or my student actually grows and forms some resiliency in their life. So here's the first thing. The goal is not failure. The goal is to allow them to struggle. The second thing is struggle and difficulty is not a necessary part of life's journey, but it's an inevitable part of life's journey. Now here's the third thing. And I really want to hit this home. Failure only exists when there's no continuation. I can remember as a little kid riding the bus home. I had to ride the bus all the way to my sophomore year. The struggle bus. It was healthy for me, okay? It was healthy for me. I learned a lot on that school bus. Some of the things I probably shouldn't know. But I can remember getting off the bus, and my brother and I'd get dropped off, and we'd have to sprint up this hill right along this fence line. I actually live right across the street from there today. And we would run in, turn the TV on, because there was a show on called Different Strokes. What you talking about, Willis? And every now and then on these shows, when you couldn't DVR and things like that, at the end of, like, I'm talking like a show that was awesome, they would have on the screen, they've captured you. Right in the middle of the screen, it would say, "To be continued." And you're like devastated, like I can't believe they just ended the show, but you looked forward to the next day because you knew the scenario was going to play itself out. Listen, the reason we don't want our kids to fail, we simply want them to struggle, is because we want there to always be a to be continued. Athletic careers that struggle still have a chance to actually do something great. Marriages who struggle can overcome and get better. Children who struggle can overachieve and find a way through the difficulty. But when you fail, when you choose failure, it means you've bowed out and you said, I can't take it anymore. So failure only exists when there's no communication. And failure exists. Here's when failure exists. Here's when kids will say it's too much, or adults will say it's too much. When the weight of difficulty becomes so heavy that they feel like it's unmanageable, then they will fail because they will say, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not worth the struggle. So what we get to do, and it's the fourth point, what we get to do is create a greater margin of handling difficulty and struggle that creates a young person or a young adult or an adult that has the resiliency to manage and get through. So here's the first thing. The goal is not failure. The goal is to struggle. Okay? We need to remove ourselves from situation where struggle is present and let it play out. Because, like we said earlier, the consequence of struggle in second grade is usually not that high. The consequence of struggle in middle school is not that high. But as the consequences, as the struggle deepens, the consequences get higher, and we want to make sure that we've created someone that's resilient enough to handle it. Here's the second thing. Struggle and difficulty is not a necessary part of life's journey. It's an inevitable part of life's journey. The third thing, failure only exists when there's no continuation. So don't say, hey, I'm gonna have my kid compete in this elite level because I want them to fail, because you don't want them to quit after that event is over. No, hey, I'm going to let my kid participate in this or take honors courses because I want them to be able to struggle and find a way through it and choose to continue no matter how difficult the struggle may be. So here's the last thing. We need to work hard at not eliminating difficulty but encouraging its continuation. Here's the fourth thing. Leaders. Okay, leaders, if you're listening, you're a leader because obviously you value the influence you have on people's lives. Leaders. Parents, coaches, CEOs, teachers, whoever is in leadership over someone or anyone are given influence. The reason you are given influence is to create margins of difficulty that allow for growth, because growth is never failure. So our job as leaders is to create margins of difficulty. And those margins look different at different phases in life. One of the things that coaches and teachers at upper levels of sport or education, they get frustrated because it's like, hey, the kid doesn't have any coping skills. Well, here's why. We never allowed them to cope. Because when they made a B in the third grade, mom showed up and argued for them to get an A. And guess what? The college professor doesn't care that mom shows up. Tuition has already been paid, and you're going to get kicked out of school, and it's no big deal. So our job as leaders, parents, coaches, whatever, we're given influence to create healthy margins of difficulty that allow for growth. The reason sport is struggling today is because we don't have healthy margins of difficulty. We've taken an adult model of sport and we've dumped it on the backs of kids. It's heavy. They carry it for a while. We help them carry it. And then all of a sudden they just bow out because they're over it. Okay, that's not a great margin of difficulty. How about let your kids go out in the backyard, figure out a game, argue it out amongst kids? Their margin grows because you were removed from the situation. All right, the only reason they're making it in a youth sport is because of us as adults, because we have to drive them there. And we have to pay for the fees and all of these things. So it's much healthier when we allow these margins of difficulty to take place early in life versus them experiencing it later in life. And let me pause here and say this. Even when you try really hard at doing this, it doesn't make it fail-proof. Okay, there are things that get thrown at us in life that are just tough, and there's no definitive answers. But here's what I truly believe. When we don't try at all, you can almost guarantee failure. So as leaders, parents, coaches, whatever, we're given influence to create margins of difficulty. One of the hardest things as a coach, especially at the collegiate level, is we get guys and then we want to manage them in the right way so that we can be successful. And sometimes we don't allow them to grow because in their growth, they can do things that actually hurt winning, whatever. And that is a tough balance to deal with because, hey, you want to do what's best for your program and you want to be successful, but at the same time you see where growth needs to take place. And here's what I've discovered in life. Growth never stops. It never stops. I see in my parents, growth never stops. I see in my life, growth never stops. If it does stop, it's because I'm usually being arrogant or self-centered. So, 2 years ago, as you look at this margins of difficulty thing, if we're supposed to create margins of difficulty, I illustrated it this way the other day. 2 years ago, I signed up for Ironman Chattanooga. The next morning, I didn't go out and swim 2.4 miles. I didn't bike 116. Chattanooga's a 116-mile bike. And I didn't run 26.2 miles. You know why? Because my margin of difficulty hadn't reached that limit yet. I went out and I did a 20-minute swim, 5-mile run, 30-mile bike. Then I upped my bikes to 50. And then eventually you're doing an 80-mile bike and a 10-mile run. And what I did over the course of the year is I created larger margins of difficulty that I could handle, and by the time race day came around, I was 100% confident that failure wasn't an option because of the margins I had set. I was prepared. It's called preparation. I knew that my training was difficult enough, that I'd gone through enough struggle, that my body was resilient enough and my mind and my heart were resilient enough to handle race day, and that I would be successful, whatever that looked like. On a day that long, you never know what that's going to look like. So our job as leaders is to increase that margin of difficulty in those whom we influence. When we create a larger margin of difficulty, we decrease the chance for failure. So listen, man, I know it's tough. I am a parent. It is hard. It is tough when you see your kid struggle. Listen, it was tough when I came home and you know, my daughter, hey, I got accused of this, and we immediately want to go in defense mode. But here's what I truly believe. I just wrote this down before I started. Failure is much more likely in people when struggle has been absent. Failure is much more likely in people when struggle has been absent. Listen, if you lift weights, or you exercise, or you train for a test, listen, in academics, failure is much more likely when the struggle of homework and going to class and diligence hasn't been present. Failure is much more likely. When the struggle is present, success begins to take place, and you begin to see a person who is resilient and who can withstand the storm. I love what the Bible says. Listen, the Bible says this: the rains will fall, the floods will come, and the winds will blow. It doesn't say the rains might fall, the floods might come, and the winds might blow. Listen, in every person's life, there is going to be difficulty that you have to face and walk through. Some is chosen, some is unchosen, but there are going to be some times where struggle, as Lisa Irby texted me yesterday and said, listen, man, I need you to help me get off the struggle bus. Listen, there are times in life when we're just simply on the struggle bus, and what we want to do, we want to create an infrastructure where that struggle is healthy, and we increase those margins of difficulty so that you don't want to jump off when the going gets tough, and you want to continue. So as you walk through these times, remember, listen, my wife just jumped on, and she's so much better at this than me, but as you walk through these times, remember, every now and then, like in the heat of the moment, when a decision has to be made, make sure that you zoom out and ask where the greatest lesson can be taught. Listen, when your kid comes home in the 4th grade and, you know, it's not the grade you wanted, or maybe you even think they earned or deserved, is the greater lesson in being silent, or is the greater lesson in intervening? I believe so often, listen, we don't have to create the struggle in their life. If we would just allow the natural ones to play out the way God intended it, and allow them to grow naturally, we would see people who mature in a healthy way, and that in 10 or 15 years that we would see a generation of people who, we're not saying lack resiliency, but actually have resiliency. So 4 things again: the goal's not failure, the goal's to struggle. Failure has an end point. Struggle and difficulty is not a necessary part of life, it's an inevitable part of life. Let it play out. 3rd thing, failure only exists when there's no continuation. All right? When you lose, it's not failure as long as you get back up. If you get bucked off the horse, as my dad always said, get back on the horse. And then the 4th thing, as leaders, parents, coaches, CEOs, etc., as we're given influence to create margins of difficulty that truly allow for growth. Because I believe this in every area of life. Growth is never failure. Growth is never failure. And then the last thing, as you make these decisions for your children, for your athletes, for your classroom, for your employees, understand this: failure is much more likely when struggle has been absent. Why do athletes practice hard? Because it's a struggle and it increases the chance for success. Why do doctors study hard? Because the struggle increases their chance for success. Thanks for joining in. If you didn't catch it all live, go back. I encourage you to share these things. We want to get these out to as many people possible, not because I have it figured out. I promise you, listen, I am on the struggle bus with every single person that listens to these things and just want to make a difference. I saw a t-shirt this summer at an FCA camp, and the t-shirt said this. It said, "If not us, then who? And if not now, then when?" And the t-shirt really was talking about, winning games or whatever, but I think more of us as individuals need to ask that question. Hey, if we're going to make a difference in this world, if not me, then who? And if not now, then when? So something as simple and silly as Facebook Live, if this can have an impact on one individual, then we're going to count it worthwhile and continue to make a difference. So as you walk through these times, remember, zoom out, ask where the greatest lesson can be taught, and enjoy these struggles as you walk through them, even though they're difficult at times. So visit heathesslinger.com, go to blogs, check it out, hit book now if you would like to hear more about this in person, but we would love to come and have an impact on your school, your organization, your athletic team, whatever. A better way.